I'm here on the Golan Heights in northern Israel, close to Israel's border with Syria. Behind me is the Alpha Line. West of the Alpha Line is Israel. East of the Alpha Line is a 155 square mile UN-monitored buffer zone in Syrian territory, which separates Israeli forces from Syrian forces that are stationed east of the Bravo Line. The fence that you can see here was built by Israel in recent years in its entirety on the Israeli side of the Alpha Line. So, how did this situation emerge and why is it important today? To understand the current state of affairs, we have to look back into the history of the region. In 1948, immediately after declaring independence, Israel was attacked by 6 Arab armies, including Syria, from its north. This war became known as Israel's War of Independence. In 1949, after the war ended, Israel and Syria signed an armistice agreement overseen by the United Nations. However, in the following years, Syrian forces repeatedly violated the agreement and subjected the communities of northern Israel to continued attacks from the Golan Heights. 18 years later, the Six-Day War erupted. As an outcome of the Syrian attacks during the war, Israel gained control over the Golan Heights. On October 6, 1973, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar called Yom Kippur, Syria launched a surprise attack on Israel from the north, along with Egypt from Israel's south. In a 3-week-long Yom Kippur war, Israel countered the Syrian attack and retained its positions on the Golan Heights by the end of the war. In the aftermath of the war, the United States and the Soviet Union brokered an Israeli-Syrian agreement on disengagement. The agreement was then adopted by the UN Security Council under Resolution 350. This established the Alpha Line, which separated between Israeli and Syrian territory, and a UN-monitored buffer zone between Alpha and Bravo lines separating both of our military forces. The demilitarized zone and the limitation zone are supervised by a UN disengagement observer force called UNDOF, which is mandated to ensure that no military personnel or munitions enter that specific area. But in recent years, Iranian-led terror activity inside Syria has posed an increased threat to Israel's security and to the stability of the agreement of disengagement. Since the outbreak of the war in Syria in 2011, Iran has attempted to entrench itself and its proxies, including the Lebanese terror group Hezbollah in southern Syria, close to Israel's border. During 2018 and 2019, Iranian militants launched direct aerial attacks on Israel from inside Syria. The IDF thwarted an attack on Israel from the buffer zone in the Syrian Golan Heights. And more recently, the IDF thwarted an attempt by 4 terrorists to place an improvised explosive device near the Alpha Line against Israel. The terrorists crossed the buffer zone between Israel and Syria towards the Israeli security fence before they were stopped by IDF troops. These incidents constitute severe violations of the agreement on disengagement. UNDOF should ensure Syria refrains from stationing forces and munitions inside the demilitarized zone and that they remain entirely behind the Bravo Line. Israel is fully within its rights to cross the fence, bearing in mind that it doesn't cross the Alpha Line, because the fence is several meters shy of the Alpha Line. Crossing the fence does not mean entering into Syrian territory, it only means that we crossed our fence. The IDF will continue to defend Israeli sovereignty in northern Israel and will not hesitate to respond to any attack from inside Syria, whether it's from Syrian forces, Hezbollah terror operatives, or Iranian militias. We stand prepared.